I'm Joe Barbieri. I'm the local history librarian at the New City Library. And alonghand, being my co-pilot today is Brian Jennings, the head of adult services. And we're going to run through and try to just basically talk about what Ancestry is, how to get there, and do some basic searches with it. I know this is not everyone's first time with Ancestry, so if you have a pointer or something else you want to point out, go ahead and share that too in the chat or the Q&A there. We'll see if we can point that out if you have a tip or a trick for anybody. All right, so we are going to get started now. I think we've got a good chunk of folks here already, so let's get going. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over and share my screen with you so you can see where we are, and we're going to get to the library's website. We're going to start just here on newcitylibrary.org, but first we're just going to talk about what Ancestry is in general. Ancestry is a collection of indexed records for genealogy, and to access it, normally there is a subscription fee, but when you use it with the library, there isn't. You may have seen commercials on television for the DNA testing service. This isn't that. That's another portion of Ancestry, and if you want to get into that, you certainly can. But this is just, we're just talking about the online record searching portion of Ancestry today. So what kind of records does Ancestry have? They have census records, military records, vital records, which are birth, marriage, and death records, immigration, and many other kinds of records too. Most of the records that we have online here at Ancestry are from the United States. Once you leave the US, they do have fewer records. Ancestry, normally when you get it at home, it is a paid service. And keep in mind, while we're doing all of this today, Ancestry's, their goal is to basically get you hooked on the Ancestry bug and the genealogy bug, and to try it at the library, get your foot in the door, show you that it's something that you can do and can be fun and very rewarding. But kind of at the end of the day, ideally, they'd like to sell you one of these higher tiered subscriptions. So just keep in mind that what we're going to do today is mostly going to be within the United States. When you start getting more serious about your genealogy, you can certainly look to expand it with Ancestry, or there are lots of other sources and services out there. But right now, most of our records that we're going to be dealing with today are just within the US. What we're going to do today is just, first we're going to show you how to get there. And we're going to start out at newcitylibrary.org. And that is the library's website. And once we're on newcitylibrary.org, we're going to go up to the top here to the e-library. And we are going to, when we mouse over that, we get a drop-down box. And we're going to go down to databases and research. Normally we find it under history and genealogy, but we've got it right up front here, right in front of our faces. And one thing that I want you to be aware of is that because of this whole COVID-19 thing, Ancestry has been very generous, and they're letting us have home access until the end of May. This was originally, they had given this to us till the end of April, and then they had kind of bumped this back. We don't know if they're going to keep on extending this generosity of theirs, so I'd say you have about 2 weeks at home if you do, guaranteed, if you do want to get into this, if you do want to give this a try. So what we're going to do is, we have our little blurb here about what Ancestry is, wide range of resources and genealogical research. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on the link where it says arranged by, due to COVID-19. We're going to click on this site right here. We're going to follow that link, and it's going to bring us to a password screen. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enter the first 5 digits of our New City Library card number. Okay, and this is just to make sure that we're New City folks going and using Ancestry. And we're going to say go when we punch that in. We don't need to save it for password. And we get another screen here, and we're just going to keep on following that link. And here we are at Ancestry. There are a lot of things that it throws out right in front of us. We have some quick links to doing searching and message boards, learning center, charts and forums, new collections. That's up at the top, kind of our menu bar. We have how to get records back home, and we're going to talk about that today. We have our quick links to some of our record groups that are popular. The census records are a big major source that they have for us, so we're going to also see them, but they have a big link down there. The first thing that they have here for us is this big Omni search here that's just begin searching. And if we click on that, this is more or less how an Ancestry search works. We start out with basic information. We can enter a first and a middle name, then a last name, a place the ancestor may have lived. You can do a birth year as well. And then we get other options too. And if we click down on that, we can always tack on events, a birth date, a marriage date, when they passed away, and we can also add in family members as well. And that's going to be important for narrowing down people because we're not the only ones who have our names, and our ancestors certainly weren't either. On the right here, you can see we also have some collections, and these just kind of give us an overview of the different records that it's going to be searching. In this first search here, it's going to search through all of these. So I'll just do an example search there to show you what a result is going to be like, and how we can then kind of use the limiters and narrow it down. Let's try to do a search here. So we're going to do, for our first name, we're going to do Hiram Blauvelt, one of our Blauvelts from Rockland County. And we are going to say search. And we just did a name, and I'm going to show you how many results we're going to get and how we might want to narrow that down. So this is a results screen here. And what Ancestry does, it throws these results at you in the middle of the page here. And it kind of seems like an arbitrary list almost. It's just things that matched up right away. So the first thing we have is a passenger list from Hawaii. So it's like, okay, well, maybe he went on a boat trip out to Hawaii at one point in time. But what I really want to show you here is the narrowers and the limiters. And what we can do is we can use the information that we provided to limit, to kind of narrow these results down. You can see at the top here, we got 3,000 results, and we're only showing 1 of 20 now. So if we went through all of that, that would take a very long time. And let's see if we can narrow that down a little bit. The first thing I want to show you is these slider bars up here. So for the things that we entered, we have these slider bars. So for the name, we can do broad, sounds alike, sounds similar, and then we can say we want exact. I would say leave a little bit of leeway for your spelling, because things were often transcribed or even misspelled a lot of the time. So we can leave it at broad. Same thing goes for surnames as well. Down here, this is where we can limit to where we need to, if we're looking for a specific type of record. So for instance, if I want to see if he was in the military, we could narrow down to military. If I wanted to just look for census records, we could go for census and voter lists there. These are our limiters here. We could go clicking away on these records here, but let's just play with a limiter here. Now, if we see these results and we say, oh, wait, that's way too many things, we can always tack on more by clicking Edit Search, and we can always add other things. So we can always keep on saying Oradell, Bergen County, New Jersey. Okay, so we can search, and that will also give us a little bit of a limiter there. And you'll see we'll get some more limitations there. Okay, so let's see what happens when we click on one of these here and we pull up a record, maybe from a census. Okay, so here we have we used our limiters, and now it further narrowed it down. So we could even try other census records from the 1800s or the 1900s. Our fellow here, he was in the early 20th century. So when we mouse over one of these, we can see the things that were transcribed. So for instance, we can see that it was pulled from this written record from the census sheet that the census taker took, that Hiram was born in 1898. He's male, he's white, he's about 32 years old, he's single, and he's still living with his parents. He is the son to the head of the house. If we actually want to see this record, we can click on it, and we can just click on it right here, or we can go up here to view the image. And we'll get that transcribed version right there. So we can see some other things. We can see the other folks who he's living in the house with. We can see what he does. His father was born out in Ohio. We can see the dwelling and family number and the house number. And that's not necessarily the street number, but the order of the house. That was the 36th house on the that the census taker had done on that street there. So if we go to view the record, a lot of the time we'll have a scanned record that they have for us to actually see in person. And a lot of times it's better to take a look at these because sometimes those transcriptions that we see are incorrect there. So this is a typical Ancestry view of a record. You'll notice that they did highlight our fellow right here. There's Hiram Blauvelt right there, and he's in yellow. The rest of the people in his household are in green, and that's kind of handy to help locate, first locate them on the page, and then to just remind us that, hey, you know, we're not just looking for single people some of the time, we're looking for whole family groups. That's one of the ways we can narrow down making sure we're looking for the right folks. Brian's here reminding us that, yes, adding a family member is always a good limiter. You know, you might be the one, you know, there might be other Hiram Blauvelts, but there are only so many Hiram Blauvelts whose parents are, let's see, in our case here, Elmer and Margaret, and then, you know, who have children, Anne and Hiram. So we are definitely limiting down the number of Hiram Blauvelts there. So some other things to take a look at. In some of the bigger record groups like the census, Ancestry has actually at the top of the page here, I'm trying to point, I'm using my mouse, I'm gonna have to break that habit. In gray, they have, if you follow along where my mouse is, they are, they kind of transcribe what each of these columns are. Over here on the right-hand side of the page, we have our tools. We can zoom with the plus, we can pull back out, and those are probably our most important ones. We can pan by clicking and dragging around, and you'll notice that these columns follow with us here. So there, we can see the home value right there, and you may notice that they have a pretty high home value. Maybe on Kinderkamak Road, you've driven by that big big mansion on the right-hand side as you're going south to New Jersey with the cedar shingles, it looks like, I think, and that's this house. It's a pretty big one. But here we could read all of the information, and sometimes we can glean things that were incorrectly transcribed or not completely transcribed on that record sheet. And again, we have some zoom tools here. If we ever get to a record and it cuts off at the bottom of the page, you can go to the next page here on the right-hand side, and we have our little arrows to go back and forth, left and right. Sometimes it's good to check the couple pages around someone in a census. There's, we can see that there's family members or neighbors nearby that might be familiar to us or we might have heard about. And that is viewing a record in Ancestry. If we want to save this or use it for later, we have a couple of options. Up here on the right-hand side, we have Save. And what you can do is you can either send this image home, and what that'll do is it will ask you for your email address, and you punch in your email twice to make sure that it's correct, and it will just email you a link to this image. So what that looks like is this. You'll get an email from Ancestry, and it will say, you made discoveries in Ancestry. And what you say is, view your discoveries, and it will actually give you links to get to these images. So here's one I did for the census the other day, and if I download that image, it will save the image that I had pulled up the other day. Or we can just save this directly to a computer. Now, if you're in the library and using Ancestry, you're going to bring along a USB drive so that you can save that there. But if you're on your home computer till the end of the month, you can just say save to this computer, and it will ask you where you want to save it. And another thing that I would do is you can see it kind of comes up with a very funny file name. Keep a notebook handy for all of these things. You know, you might be working digitally with these records, but it's always good to keep a physical notebook so that you can take notes on things like, oh, maybe that file name is a wacky one. I'm going to rename it, but here's what it actually is, or when you find something so you can get back to it. And that's also important if you're trying to, let's say something comes up and you have to step away from your research for a little bit, you can come back to that and kind of pick up where you left off. So that's the importance of keeping a physical notebook, even if you are you know, doing a lot of your work digitally here on a website like Ancestry. So we're going to go back, and we are going to look at some of the other search options that Ancestry has, and some of the other kind of records that we can look through. So let's play with some more of those, and we'll play with some of the limiters as well too. So we're going to go back to home here, and we're just going to begin searching all over again. So let's see some of the things that we can punch in to get a search started. So we're going to use Arthur Tompkins. He wrote a history of the county, and of course he was one of our politicians and judges here as well at the turn of the century. So we're going to try to find Mr. Arthur Tompkins. So we're going to say Arthur and Tompkins. And I do know that he's born in 1868. But one thing I wanted to show you was that this handy feature they have here is this exact plus or minus. And that's pretty handy if we don't know the exact date someone was born, or if sometimes you see on the census record, ages and dates that people were born are estimated because maybe they haven't had their birthday yet at the time of the census. So what we're going to do is, let's say we're going to add plus or minus 2 years. So that kind of gives us a little leeway. For now, we're going to say just Rockland County. You can start with just country. You can work down your way to state. If you know county or town or village, you can do that as well. A lot of the time, I think it's best to just do county. Remember, our town and village lines here in Rockland evolved over the years. So a lot of times, I just stick with Rockland County. So let's do that. Now, if we wanted to add more, let's see we knew more details, we could always punch that in. So we could say, if we knew who his father was, we could punch that in. If we knew who his spouse was, we could add that as well. If we knew he had any children, we could use that. All right, so let's just see what happens when we search for Arthur Tompkins, born about 1868, plus or minus 2 years here. Okay, and here we have some more census records. And if we mouse over them, we get the little blurb. Okay, so born see there they have him born in 1866. He's about 64 in 1930, and he's living in Upper Nyack. Okay, and again, we could use the narrowers here, and we could also use this right here. Let's see, this is these are our search parameters. We could make it very exact. It has to be in Rockland County. We could make it, it has to be in, let's say, you know, maybe he was over the border in Bergen. We could also do that as well. We could just bump it out to state and adjacent states, or we could just do very broad, which just includes any Arthur Tompkins. So that's just using our limiters there. And again, when we use this first Omni search, it searches all the different kinds of records. Over here on the left, we have our limiters. But what happens, we can just search by specific record groups if we want to. So we're going to go back here to search. And we're going to take a look at some of these different kinds of records that we have. Okay. First, let's try some vital records. So these are usually birth, marriage, and death records, kind of the big life moments for us, so to speak. So if we click on this, it will only look through things for things like marriage, divorces, cemeteries, obituary records, and that's what we're going to find in these. So let's find someone. So our example here, we're going to look for a very famous person who wore several hats. Okay, and we're going to look for a Howard Hughes. We know he's born about 1905. And let's see. We know that, we don't know where that is, but let's just say we knew that that was in Texas, USA. So we can look for a Howard Hughes in Texas. Okay. And we get a couple different things here. Let's see. We have some death certificates. Okay, so here we're finding out that it's Howard Robard Hughes. Okay, and he was born 24th of December, 1905. And so we can just take a look at this death certificate here. And if this was something that, let's see, we think might be one we want to save, we would go up here and we would say save. And let's see, he is an industrialist who does investments. Yeah, okay. And here on a record like this, we find out some vital information. We can find out his mother's name and her maiden name, so that might help us along the way. We actually have his Social Security on here. It's a good thing that this is a pretty old record. We have, and then things about the burial even, and the cemetery. So we can also use that information to go find out a little bit more and verify some of the other information that we find. So let's go back to our results. And oh, here we have a cemetery index here. Okay. And this one is actually linking us out to a website called Find a Grave, where people actually post pictures of grave sites. And here we go, April 5th, 1976, passed away, born on 24th of December, 1905. So if we take a look at this, now in this case, we're lucky enough that someone has taken a picture of this grave. And of course, Howard Hughes is kind of well known, for better or for worse. So we actually have a picture of, this is you know, a little more elaborate than I think you and I might wind up with when we depart this earth. But anyway, we can use all the information found here to more or less verify that, yes, this is the Howard Hughes that we're looking for. All right. So that's an example of using vital records. Now, you know, Howard Hughes also married and divorced several times. We can, you know, find out things like that too. So here we have some Texas marriage and divorce records as well. You'll see there are other Howard Hugheses that appear in some of these other record series. But again, these are probably not going to be our Howard Hughes because the time periods and the places don't exactly line up. England and Wales civil marriage records, maybe not our Howard Hughes. And again, we have our limiters up here if we need. But this is how we would also find another kind of record we would find in our vital records. So vitals, birth, marriage, death. Stuff to keep in mind. Things like birth certificates are actually relatively new kinds of records. Before that, we're probably going to mostly be relying on religious institution records. But birth records actually relatively new. Before 1900, pretty uncommon, and they really only start to be common in the 1920s, 30s. So things like that, you might not always find a birth record for an ancestor out there. Keep that in mind. Let's go back home and we'll try another kind of search from one of our other categories. So we just did vitals, birth, marriage, and death records. We had kind of done a census record again. We'll do another one here just to kind of highlight that. And we're going to look for another member of royalty, if you will. We're going to look for the King of rock and roll. Now, if we just do Elvis Presley, we'll see what kind of results we get. But we could also use our limiters here. Now, you'll notice that we are getting lots of records from the UK. Let's say we want to limit that, and let's limit by place. Let's limit to North America. And let's see what we get now. Okay, so now we have an example of, we just used one of our limiters here to limit to North America. Let's take a look at this first record here. Elvis Presley. Now, this Elvis is, he's born in Mississippi. That might be the Elvis we're looking for. Let's see if we can, what happens. You know, this doesn't seem like the Presley that we want, but let's take a look at what happens when we look at this record. So if we mouse over it, we see that he's 5 years old. He's born January 8th, 1935, and he's in Lee, Mississippi. And this is why it's always important to look at the records in person. Now, I want you to notice one thing up here. You'll see that there are some that we see in these brackets, and those are changes that have been made by Ancestry members who have taken a look at this and said, hey, wait a second, this does not look right, or this does not match up to what it should be. So these recommendations, we can't make them because we're using a library subscription, but this is what some of the other Ancestry members have done. So let's take a look. If we actually view the record here, we can see that maybe they had a trouble transcribing that, and that's why it came up as Elzjs Presley. So again, we're very lucky they highlighted for us here. If they don't highlight it, and they don't on all the records, you just work your way down. And let's see. And here we have, you can see why that error in transcription happened, because above them, it's Audie Austin, Elvis's neighbor next door. It looks like that the V may have been reading that D looped down as a J or a Z from the Audie's D's right there. So if we wanted to verify that this is in fact the king of rock and roll, we would probably just find a biography on him and just take a look at and maybe just check some factual information. His father is a carpenter, his mother is a seamstress, and they're living in Lee, Mississippi. So if we could take a look at things like that, we would probably be able to verify, so in conjunction with other research, that, hey, this is in fact the Elvis Presley that we think of when we say Elvis Presley. So there's an example, again, using the census records. We're going to go back here with this back arrow up at the top left. And we're going to go back to another search, and we're going to work our way down the types of records that they have on the computer. Okay. Let's do some immigration and travel records. Okay. And immigration and travel records are fun. They have quite a few on here from the various ports that people were coming into this country, and ship manifest records had a lot of useful information, a lot of very interesting information. So let's see. So what we're going to do is we are going to search for. We're gonna find one of my great grandparents. We're gonna find Dario Spola. And we're going to try to search by, after we punch his name in, we're going to narrow that down by passenger lists. So here we did find naturalization records, and again, we could use that at the end. But let's see if we can find a passenger list for great-grandpa Dario when he's coming in. And let's see. Okay, here's one. And we're going to, if we mouse over this here, we can see that we have a little blurb here, and let's see, coming in from Le Havre, and he's a Northern Italian. He is 20 years old. This one here, his birth location is Chiarazzo. Now, this is something where, again, you have to piece together other information. It's actually Chiavarza was the town that he was from, and the ship name was the Chicago. So let's click on this record here, and we can find lots of interesting records or pieces of information here. Sometimes Ancestry has a picture of the boat, and that's kind of handy. You can save that one and keep it in the scrapbook there. So there's the Chicago in service from 1908 to 1928 there. And that's the ship that great-grandpa Dario came over on. And if we go back, we can actually take a look at this record here. And let's see. So this one they don't have highlighted for us. So we are going to look up here for family name, and we're going to work our way down, and we are looking for Spola, S-P-O-L-A. Did I pass it? Yes, I did. There we go. There he is. Okay, and if we mouse across, we can see he is a laborer. Now, it's tricky here. We have to constantly go back up to the top here to take a look at these column headings. Okay, let's see. These are really interesting because they have, sometimes they'll have the name of the nearest friend or relative, from where they came from. So again, this might be something to look up. Oh, who is Francesco Spola at Chiavarza? That might be someone who we have to look up. What's the relation there? So there we have an example of a passenger list from a ship manifest. Sometimes these have really neat information about how much money they had on them when they came over, who they were going to see and spend their time with while they were going to be in America as well. So that's an example of a passenger record, and these have some neat information on them sometimes about where people are coming from, where they're going to, and even things like how much money they have on them when they come in. So there we have an example of a passenger list from a ship. And that's an example of one of the kind of immigration records that we have here. Yeah. Okay. So there's also a lot of naturalization papers here. Especially around the turn of the century. We have quite a few of examples of those as well. You can also glean a lot from that. Let's go back to our search, and we'll take a look at another kind of record, and we're going to be looking at military records now. And we'll look at a local hometown hero here. So we're going to try by military. Whoop. Let's see if we can refresh that page. Didn't like us there. Nope. Maybe we won't be looking at military records today. All right, so I guess we're not going to be looking at military records today, but I just want you to be aware that even if the person did not serve in any branches of the military, we did have several drafts in this country's history, and from draft cards you can actually glean quite a bit. Oh yeah, let's see if we can do a general, and we can search and then limit from that. So let's look for Wilson Deffendorf. Okay, and he is a local fella from New City. So we're going to try our limiters, and we're going to see if we can just limit that to military records. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if Wilson is on our list of town clerks' records of men who served in the Civil War. So let's see. Oh, here. So we have he enlisted in Clarkstown in the 6th New York Artillery Company K, and he's a captain. And sometimes we can glean other information from these records as well. So let's take a look at the actual record itself. And here he is at the bottom of the page. but we're going to take a quick look at things up here. Let's see, names. Okay, when enlisted, place of enlistment. Let's see, names of parents and previous occupations. So we don't have any of that for him. Oh, let's see, promotions, resignations, discharges, deaths, etc., with dates, causes, etc. Transferred September 1863 to the United States. I can't read that one. Something core, I think. But anyway, so there's an example of a military record that we have there of Captain Deffendorf from Clarkstown. Let's see if we can go back to our other results here, because every once in a while we can get a really good gem here. Let's see. Here we have a calling card, and I think we may have a photo attached to it. There we go. So there's Captain Deffendorf. And we have a question here in the chat that someone has a Finkelstein card, and we're going to double check to see on that if they have access. Okay. So there's Captain Deffendorf right there. And again, this isn't going to be for everyone, and we kind of lucked out here. And again, I'm handpicking these examples because they're ones that work. Remember, you're going to have to be doing a lot of sifting and sorting on your own. We're kind of doing the abbreviated, make it look easy version of the things here today. Okay, we have another question. Are photos and other documents copyrighted? Is the database worldwide or US only? Something like this, we would see, let's see where they got this from. New York in the Civil War, cartes de visite, New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. So this may very well be under copyright. This is something that we would probably have to investigate and get a hold of the State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs. The databases that are on here, Ancestry does have some worldwide record series on here. Most of them are going to be from the US or other English-speaking countries at this level here, at the library level. If you want to take your research further, they have paid tiers that that can get you more international records. The thing to keep in mind is that while you're doing research with the library, is Ancestry's plan is to get you hooked on this genealogy bug and eventually get you roped in to becoming a subscriber to them. So a lot of times we can get started here, and most of the records that we have are going to be from the US or either folks coming into the US, but it is a little bit harder once we leave the country. Okay, and it looks like Finkelstein doesn't have access to this, Ancestry right now. But, you know, maybe that's something that they will look into in the future. So another thing that I want you to be aware of that I had alluded to before is even if we don't have a, even if you had someone in your family who was not in the military, we've had several drafts in this country, and a lot of times you can glean some fun information from those draft cards. So we're going to find, let's see, and so we're going to look for Julius Henry Marx, and we're going to see if we can find some military enlistment records from him. And let's see, we're going to narrow down to military. Let's see. Okay, so here we have a World War I draft registration card. And if we take a look at that, okay. Here we have Julius Henry Marx, and you might be asking who this is. Well, let's see if we can figure it out a little bit from some of our clues here. Let's see, he is a natural born. He's born in New York. His occupation is actor. So he's self-employed and he's traveling. He's supporting some folks here, mother, father, and he's single right now. And here's our signature here. So we know this person is an actor, born about 1891. I'm going to spoil it for you. This is Groucho. So this is Groucho Marx. And we can get some information from this card. He's tall. He's of a medium build. He has brown eyes and dark brown hair. And he's not bald. And he doesn't have any, hasn't lost any of his limbs. So, and this was taken up in Chicago. So sometimes we can glean extra information about our relatives or our ancestors from information here. So we have information about that he's tall and dark brown hair, brown eyes, things like that. Little details that we might not have known otherwise. And again, he wasn't in the military, but he did have to register for this draft. So this is something where we find that. Okay, so now let's see. Can I copy it? Yeah, we can see if we can get you an email of some of the links that we have here in the that we're sharing here today in the chat. Yeah, so we can see if we can email this to you. I see we've got a question or two about that in the chat coming up. All right. Now, let's see if we want to cover any other kinds of, those are our real main record groups here, but there are a couple other tools that I want you to be aware about in the database here. So a couple things I want you to know about. There are message boards with someone with a library login with this. We can't really add to those message boards. And that's something that's kind of a downside, but we can read them. Some of them are quite old and they go back a few years, but they are another interesting resource. They narrow by topics like place. You can narrow down by Rockland County. We could read posts from people looking for things there. There's general categories. We can also search by surnames, and then there's also topics there as well. So this is another way that you can't contribute and add to, but you can read what other people have been posting about. In the Rockland County one, there's several old Rockland families, different schools and institutions. There are threads about that there. So you can see what other people have found and are coming across in the past there. So we can't add to these things because we don't have personal accounts. We just have a library account, but we can always read some of the posts that other members have found. And have, we can see if we can build on what they've found in the past there. Other things to be aware about. You may come across certain people, this does have tools, again, this is for people with full accounts, personal accounts, where you can build out your own family tree. And I just want to caution you that you may come across one of these, but I would say use it with a grain of, kind of use the information that's there with a grain of salt, because you want to be able to check and verify for yourself that it's true. Sometimes you'll find wacky things about, this person was born in this year, but then they had a kid when they were 10 years old. Well, that doesn't sound right. So maybe this person who built out this family tree is looking in the wrong, had the wrong person placed there in the wrong data. So you want to be able to verify that for yourself. So I'll show you an example of one of these family trees and what it looks like. And we are going to find my great-grandmother, Cecilia McArdle. And let's see if we can find her in a family tree. Every once in a while, you might find a result in a family tree. And we can cut to the chase down there with our limiters. Okay. And this is her here. And again, I'm cheating. because I had kind of had this one planned out a little bit, but you may have to go through some of these. And this one was put together by someone in my family. So I can kind of vouch for a lot of these things. But again, we want to still see if we can back these claims up. And the beauty of these family trees is that we can do that. Ancestry gives us the tools to do that. If we click on the people in the tree, for instance, and go to the facts up here, we get kind of a little personal timeline for her. And they'll actually show the sources in Ancestry where they are. So we can double check on these. So we can see the source for that backs up that she was born in the Bronx. And all of these sources here have that. In this case, someone here in my family actually added a few pictures. And again, these are pretty neat because I actually hadn't ever seen these ones. Okay. And there's my my great-grandmother with my grandparents and or my grandfather and his brothers there. But again, if you come across one of these family tree results, just take it with a grain of salt, because number one, you've got to really narrow down, is this someone actually in your family and who made this, or one of your relatives, and did they get the right, number two, did they get the right information? Okay, does the gallery give access to the photo? Yeah, we can see the photo there. I don't know if we can save this photo, but we can certainly view it. Let's see. Yeah, we could probably wind up saving this photo if we really wanted to. Yeah, we can save that if we wanted to. So again, the family trees, they do have information that is out there and public. So again, if you ever do get the full version of Ancestry, keep that in mind too, that folks are going to be able to look at this. The tricky part is with the library account, we can't message the person who is who made this tree and say, oh, hey, I think, you know, we're related. Do you have any information about this? Or I'm this, you know, I'm your second cousin, however many times removed. We can't really get a hold of them through that. That's something that, unfortunately, Ancestry, they want you to pay for that. But again, so family trees, you may come across them in your searching. So again, but take them with a grain of salt, make sure that, and the nice thing about Ancestry is a lot of times they will be able to link you to the documents that show all of these different claims that are being made about their vitals, where they're birthed, where they're, when they get married and things like that. So just be aware about that for the family trees. So let's go back here and we'll talk about some of the other resources that we have up here. The Learning Center is very helpful. They have a couple just kind of basic PDF documents that you can download just to kind of get you started. Things about working with certain records, just where to begin your research, and then breaking down different kinds of records, things about, you know, searching for specific kinds of folks, you know, in terms of where they're coming from, different kinds of military records, immigrations, and then kind of when you're ready to kind of building up on these sources and then beyond the basics. So basically, it's usually just kind of a PDF sheet that gets you started with some of the things that we talked about today and kind of how to do some basic information. You can print these out. You can save them on your computer. They are very handy. They're good, quick cheat sheets. Charts and forms are also very handy. They do have some basic that you can start filling out on your own. Pedigree charts, information charts, and these help for keeping track of research. Again, not something you have to do, but can make your time with your research a little bit more organized and focused. Things like doing a calendar for keeping track of when and where you did your research, correspondence records, you know, basic pedigree chart just to keep track of births, deaths, marriages, and things like that. Let's see. The new collections is very interesting. Ancestry is always adding things records to their databases here, and you see we are getting a few more international records here. We have things from Austria, a lot of Austrian records lately. But basically, this is just a catalog of the newest things that they've added. We can always search the catalog in general over here, looking for places or types of records, and then we can narrow down, again, using our limiters. Like I said, we will find some international records here, and it looks like they're adding more and more, but keep in mind, a good chunk of the stuff you're going to find here on Ancestry are US records. Ancestry, they want you to pay for that. But again, so family trees, you may come across them in your searching. So again, but take them with a grain of salt. Make sure that, and the nice thing about Ancestry is a lot of times they will be able to link you to the documents that show all of these different claims that are being made about their vitals, where they're birthed, where they're when they get married and things like that. So just be aware about that for the family trees. So let's go back here and we'll talk about some of the other resources that we have up here. The Learning Center is very helpful. They have a couple just kind of basic PDF documents that you can download just to kind of get you started. Things about working with certain records, just where to begin your research, and then breaking down different kinds of records, things about, searching for specific kinds of folks, in terms of where they're coming from, different kinds of military records, immigrations, and then kind of when you're ready to kind of building up on these sources and then beyond the basics. So basically, it's usually just kind of a PDF sheet that gets you started with some of the things that we talked about today and kind of how to do some basic information. You can print these out. You can save them on your computer. They are very handy. They're good, quick cheat sheets. Charts and forms are also very handy. They do have some basic that you can start filling out on your own. Pedigree charts, information charts, and these help for keeping track of research. Again, not something you have to do, but can make your time with your research a little bit more organized and focused. Things like doing a calendar for keeping track of when and where you did your research, correspondence records, basic pedigree chart just to keep track of births, deaths, marriages, and things like that. Let's see. The new collections is very interesting. Ancestry is always adding things, records to their databases here, and you see we are getting a few more international records here. We have things from Austria, a lot of Austrian records lately. But basically, this is just a catalog of the newest things that they've added. We can always search the catalog in general over here, looking for places or types of records, and then we can narrow down, again, using our limiters. Like I said, we will find some international records here, and it looks like they're adding more and more, but keep in mind, a good chunk of the stuff you're going to find here on Ancestry are US records. Let's see if we have anything else. That's basically Ancestry in a nutshell. There's a lot more to look at and explore, and I'll just, we'll go over just a few general hints. Remember, today we document things very well compared to the past. We have birth certificates, marriage records, we have driver's licenses, we have all sorts of forms and permits, and all these things did not exist in the past. It only takes a few generations back before we don't even have things like birth certificates, for instance. You may have to work combining sources or, to kind of make up for things that aren't there. And just keep in mind that, there might not be a birth certificate for someone born in the 1800s, okay? You got to trust what you find. You may come across one of these posts in the forum or on these family trees that people have created on here, but trust what you can find and you can back up yourself. Don't take anyone else's words for it there necessarily. All right. Um, let's see. Start with what you know for sure, or you're pretty sure you know for sure, and work backwards. Begin with people nearer to you if you can. Start with a parent or a grandparent or a great grandparent. Don't try and start to jump back, the seventh great grandparents. We're going to try to, that's to get there eventually. It's easier to work from what we're more certain with and then work our way back from that. Spelling isn't always so rigid. We have people, coming in from other countries who may be going to various clerks or record keeping offices, and they may be misspelling their names. We have people who, the census, for instance, we may have had a child of the family or a neighbor giving that information to the census taker. So they might have not been sure of some of that information or some of that spelling. So you may run into a case where, things aren't exactly like what we saw with Elvis. Things aren't exactly spelled the way we expect them to be. So that's something that I just want you to be aware of there too. The other thing is to kind of look for family groups. We can search for individuals, but the real way to narrow down, do we have the right person, is by family groups. Do they have a spouse named, is the husband named James? And do they have a child named Sue? There might be a million John Smiths out there, but if he has a son named Aloysius, that's going to narrow down our number of John Smiths, okay? So we're looking for the bigger family groups. Don't forget that. If you come across someone, who you suspect might be a cousin or a relative, write that down, keep that information handy, because that's something that you might need to go back to. And again, these records are online, but keep a physical notebook handy. It's so much easier, in my opinion, to go back to something that you've written down. Writing things down helps you remember them. And it's just, if you have to pause your research, it's nice where you can have that linear record to go through and saying, okay, here's what I found today. I need to follow up on this. I'm going to check for this kind of record next. And then you kind of have this, if you ever need to pause your research or you want to go back to it, much easier to do that when you have a physical notebook or record in front of you, if you ask me. Finally, there is that, remember, keep in mind, there's this learning center up here. There are also a few other sources that I want to just make you aware of. And let's see if we can pull up. Let's see. There's a great, Ancestry has a great YouTube page. I'm trying to pull this up here. I don't know if I can have you see it. They have a great YouTube page with lots of instructional videos and how-tos. Let's see if we can just pull that one up here. Okay, we are going to try to pull that up here. Let's see. There's a great, Ancestry has a great YouTube page. I'm trying to pull this up here. I don't know if I can have you see it. They have a great YouTube page with lots of instructional videos and how-tos. Let's see if we can just pull that one up here. Okay, we are going to try to pull that up here. And let's see. Let's just do a search for Ancestry, and here they are here. We've got some great, they have lots of instructional videos, some how-tos. Some of them are more promotional for things like that, but they have, kind of some in-depth looks and additional examples for you to look at. So a lot of them, very involved. Some of them are fairly long too, so you can really jump in to those. The other thing I want you to be aware of is they actually have a support page, Ancestry support, and I had this. It's support.ancestry.com. search and record, .com/s/search and records. I want to see if I can find that for you. And they have additional how-tos on here as well. If you go up here, so we're at support.ancestry.com, and up here under search, they have a whole bunch of guides on how to search, doing advanced things like wildcards and fuzzy searching, some sample lessons on finding and searching as well. And again, kind of some of the things that we talked about a little bit, the charts and forms, some of the things that are a little bit redundant there. But again, this is a handy page to have, support.ancestry.com/s/search. Let's see. That is more or less our wrap up for Ancestry. Do we have any other questions in the chat or any other questions in the Q&A? Let's see, I'm trying to see here. Let's see. Okay, I don't see any in the Q&A, and I'm going to give us a second here to catch up in the chat. Okay. Oh, thanks. So thanks. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the webinar here. I don't see anything else. We're just about an hour, so I will. Thanks. I appreciate it. I don't see any other questions here. I think Brian had my email up there in the chat. If you would like to shoot me an email about any of the things that we talked about today, feel free to do so. Finally, I just want to plug when the library does get back to normal, if the ancestry and genealogy is something that you enjoy, we do have our we are the meeting place for the Genealogical Society of Rockland County. We usually meet on the 4th Tuesday of the month. We don't meet in July and August, and it's not looking like we're going to meet in May or June right now, unfortunately. But maybe in the fall we'll be picking back up. So if you enjoyed this and you want to get further into Ancestry, you don't have to be a member to attend the meetings. They're open to everyone. There's a great crew there who you can ask questions to about usually before and after the meeting. We usually have some interesting speakers, or we'll watch an informative video. So again, keep that in mind. We're usually the 4th Tuesday of the month. That's with the Genealogical Society of Rockland County. And you don't have to be a member, and that's at the library in the big meeting room there. We don't meet July and August. And hopefully, if our situation improves, we'll be picking it back up again in the fall there. So watch for that too, if this is something that you like and want to continue with. Thanks for coming, everybody, today. And we're going to wrap it up. So I hope you have...